This video may contain scenes of graphic violence. Viewer discretion is advised.
Mortal Kombat is back with its outrageous and over-the-top moves such as X-rays and fatalities in the latest installment, Mortal Kombat X. Mortal Kombat is known for a game that is really over-the-top and very gruesome. Fatalities are back in their very gory fashion, and so are X-rays. If you don't know what X-ray moves are, they would slow down the pacing of the fight and show you a close-up of every bone that's breaking and every muscle that's tearing within your fighter, or the enemy fighter. That being said, Mortal Kombat is not a game that is taken to be logical. Your character would have a broken skull and spine midway through the fight, and they would still go on until they actually lose 2 rounds in a row. So don't take account for logic when playing a game like Mortal Kombat. Instead, enjoy how fun it is to actually beat enemies up. You could string combos together as always, and you could use super moves and start juggling just like in the previous installment. Graphics aren't too important when it comes to playing a fighting game, but the frame rate is. Mortal Kombat 60 frames per second allows for a really fluid motion when fighting in the game. The roster for Mortal Kombat X isn't too expansive, but the cool thing about it is that it combines both old generations and new generations of fighters. And the fun thing about that is that some of them are actually related to each other. So let's say Johnny Cage and Sonya Blade are actually the parents of the new fighter, Cassie Cage. The roster isn't too small. There's actually a wide variety of characters and they all feel different. And the cool thing about each and every character is that they have 3 different variations to choose from, which allows you to have different sets of moves and creates a really cool balance between all the fighters. That being said, Mortal Kombat X really wants you to try out new characters and try to focus on one. Now that each character has 3 different variations, you can try to choose a character and pick which variation suits you most. This new feature is pretty neat. It actually makes me want to learn one character and one character alone and try to focus on one of their variations to see if it suits my playstyle. So far, I've been playing Aaron Black on Gunslinger mode because I like the launch of his rifle. Because of this, I try to focus on one character and I know what character I want to use now if I'm trying to play seriously. I'm not sure if this is the first time Mortal Kombat has ever had cutscenes that have QuickTime events, but this is the first ever Mortal Kombat that I've played that has QuickTime events. That being said, the story mode, every cutscene is fluid right up until you get to the QuickTime events. For some odd reason, there's a weird thing going on with the frame rate, and it starts to freeze every now and then. It drops down like 3 frames per second. It's not too bad as it's only the transition from cutscene to a QuickTime event, so you know when a QuickTime event is coming. But I just wish that they made the transition more fluid so you'd stay immersed in the story, because I know they want to tell a good story. But if there's going to be some sort of frame rate issue like that, it's going to be hard to try to focus on the cutscene itself. A lot of games suffer from that frame rate issue, especially in this generation of consoles. I remember playing Evil Within back then, which I also reviewed. You can check the link below. That the cutscenes would sometimes have textures not even loading. The frame rate would drop during a cutscene. This is really bad when it comes to video games. Cutscenes are supposed to be pre-rendered and they're supposed to work fluidly. It's understandable if the gameplay frame rate dropped, but if a cutscene did, that's something that's already pre-rendered, something that's supposed to run fluidly because you're not even applying any sort of control to the scene. That's how you know that there's something falling apart in the cinematics department. I've only played online a couple of times, and for my first match, I don't think it was because the servers are bad. I think it's just because I found a game that was farther away from where I was, so the latency was pretty bad between us. That's the sort of issue there is with online games, especially in fighting games. Lag is a really big concern when it comes to fighting games because the input is very important, how timely they are according to your enemy's input. Fighting games really suffer from online connectivity issues, especially when it lags, because fighting games, the input really matters a lot when you try to send that input to your enemy and the enemy sends the input to yours. Every second counts, even split second. My experience of online so far isn't that great, but I will try playing online a couple more times. Playing 2-player on the same console, on the other hand, is really fluid. Of course, there's no lag issues as you're playing on the same thing, so your input is coming in at the console at the same input, at the same speed the input of your enemy is. Playing on the same console, on the other hand, instead of playing online, is very convenient. Thank goodness that this game has that feature, which it should, as every fighting game should. You get to play with your friends or your tournament buddies or whoever you want to on the same console. And since it's a fighting game, it's pretty much isometric. There's no problems with playing with a different player on the same screen. The sound quality is really good. Every bone cracking, every blood gushing, and every fatality performed somehow produces a very realistic sound effect. When you hear blood gushing, it sounds like it's really blood coming out of a fountain that's pouring out of your body. Like, what you see on the screen really looks like what it would sound like if you just listen to it. The fatalities are really over the top this time around, and I enjoy them to the fullest. They are so fun to watch and fun to do over and over again. But you know that in fighting game culture, fatalities aren't done unless you really want to humiliate your enemy. Normally, when I play online, I just hit them once so it just ends right away. Because fatalities are unskippable. That's basically just making the enemy watch at least 15 seconds of something they've probably seen so many times already. So for common courtesy, if you're ever going to play this game online or with your friends, only do fatalities if allowed to do so. You don't want to hold up your opponent to his next match on the other end, just because you wanted to show him this really bloody thing that's going to happen that everybody who plays Mortal Kombat already knows about. If you're playing with friends, on the other hand, most likely they will tell you, sure, go for it, whatever, or just do it anyway because everybody's looking at it and it's fun to see. So it's just common courtesy to not perform a fatality unless allowed to do so. Because if you perform a fatality, it's 15 seconds long, you can't skip it, and you're basically just holding up your opponent on the other end who probably wants to play one more time against someone else, or you. So when playing with strangers, try not to do a fatality. It's really just downright humiliating, and it's just a waste of time. Unless you've never seen it before and you've been dying to make that fatality work, go for it. But essentially, you do not want to overdo it because it does get old after a while. Seeing the same 15 seconds of gory footage over and over again just, one, desensitizes you to it, two, it makes you bored of the whole fatality thing, and three, it just takes too damn long. One of the new features of Mortal Kombat X is the environmental moves, which takes from Injustice Gods Among Us. In Injustice, you were able to interact with the background by pressing R1 on your controller for the PS4 and the right bumper on the Xbox, and your character either took a weapon from the background or jumped off of a platform on the background to move across the screen, or pressed a button so something would launch down on the ground. In Mortal Kombat X, there's mostly just projectiles and ways to knock your opponent back and ways to jump out of the way if you're cornered. It's essentially the same system as what Injustice used, and overall it's actually really good to use in this game as well. Hitting both L2 and R2 at the same time still triggers the X-ray move, and hitting L1 still does the grab, and then R2 alone is still block, and L2 alone is still switching stance. So overall, the controls haven't changed at all from Mortal Kombat 9, and they're still as responsive as ever. As far as my knowledge of Mortal Kombat goes, this is my first time ever seeing how brutalities are. I thought brutalities were done just like a fatality, but in this game, it's actually the final hit you have on your opponent, not during the fatality dizzy move, but as the match is still going on. If your enemy has a little bit of health left and you use the brutality as a final move, it'll take off limbs or the enemy's head, or blow something up, as if you performed a fatality without the fatality dizzy moment. There are a bunch of new game modes in Mortal Kombat as well. There's a new invasion mode, a faction mode even, where you get to choose your own faction, and then there's an invasion going on, and you get to play to try to fight that invasion back and bring your faction up. Test Your Luck mode is also back, which is really fun. I've enjoyed that game mode a lot. The only downside to it is that there's no fatality at the end of the match, but it just makes the whole thing a little bit quicker, so that's actually pretty cool. Test Your Luck mode has up to 7 modifiers, and sometimes they'll work against you, with you, against both you and your opponent, or with both you and your opponent. There's also tower modes now, including online tower modes, which is basically daily challenges and weekly challenges that basically just keeps you constantly playing the game, or checking in every now and then to play the towers, or complete the daily challenges. Daily challenges are done in order to help out your faction. Basically, the faction is just racing to get who's atop, and the last time I checked, it was the Ling Kuei clan that was on top with 41%, and they're basically dominating the rest of the other factions. Overall, I really enjoy Mortal Kombat. I really wish I was better at it, but I'm still learning how to play the game. It's really fun. It's really fun to play with friends. It's actually pretty fun to play online, but because of the lag issues, I try to stay away from it for a bit. The story mode is pretty good. I enjoy the story, even though it's still the same kind of story that we always get in Mortal Kombat games. But essentially, Mortal Kombat in its own is a really enjoyable game. It's my first fighting game in a couple of months now, and I've been waiting for a good one, and Mortal Kombat is a great addition to that mix of fighting games that we already get. Mortal Kombat X is a pretty decent game. Overall, I'd say I would enjoy it pretty much. It's not everybody's game, as it is a little harder than most fighting games. You have to memorize combos, you have to memorize moves, even fatalities if you want to learn them and do them over and over again. I'm a huge fan of fighting games, and I'm really glad that I added Mortal Kombat X to the mix. I could see myself playing this game day after day, play against my friends, play against really good people, and essentially learning from them. It is one of the few fighting games where I actually want to learn how to play, because I'm not too good at Mortal Kombat. I go into the training mode, learn new combos, try to juggle enemies, and try to break combos and see which combos work with me best. I also learn which characters are my favorite and which variations do I want to use with them. Essentially, Mortal Kombat X is a great game. I love fighting games, so Mortal Kombat X is an amazing game to add to my collection of fighting games. And if you're a fan of fighting games as well, I highly recommend Mortal Kombat X.